Welcome to the Cookbook, where we invite guests on to share the ingredients of what has helped make them the successes that they are. All of it, the good, the not so good. You're not going to find anything half-baked here. And our kitchen gets messy sometimes. That's when the fun starts. So come on and join us. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Cookbook. I'm your host, Iris Goldfeder, and I'm excited about our guest today, Wilson Zehr. We spoke a while ago, and he does everything. Like he teaches, he does everything. And we're going to talk about like a lot of things that he does. And I'm going to let him, as I let all my guests, kind of tell you about him. But before we get started, click like, share, subscribe. When you're done with the episode, download, review it. Let us know if there's any golden nuggets in here that you found, and let us know in the comments below. And I'll probably say this again at the end. But for now, let's meet Wilson. Hey there.
Hey, how are you?
Good. This has been a long time coming.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on again. I appreciate the opportunity. It's always great to see you.
You as well. It's so we tried doing this. Wilson and I met, I think in like April, and we decided it was a fit and he was going to come on. And then he had a bunch of stuff happen, and so we finally were able to get this on the calendar. And what I find funny is, I have a lot of people say, you get these great guests and you make it look so easy. And I'm like, it's not always that easy because things get scheduled and then they get rescheduled. And not just you. Like if I tell you how many people this summer we rescheduled, and then I had to reschedule some stuff. And like there was actually one that I think about a half hour before we went on, I had a little bit of, and I had to cancel. So stuff happens, but I believe it happens in the time that it's supposed to, right? So here you are.
Yeah, no, it seems like we always have to leave a role for, a little room for fate to do its thing.
Yes, 100%. I like the way you put that. It's like fate to do its thing. So it's funny because you teach entrepreneurship and marketing, and you do so many, fascinating things. And I remember when we first spoke, I was thinking, well, shit, what are we going to talk about? Because he does all the things. So I would say, let's start with your story, like your foray. And I know that you and I spoke about this, but, into entrepreneurship and into like all of the things that you do, like how did everything start?
Well, I think, first of all, I think you're a much better musician than I am.
We'll see.
I don't do much of that, but I love listening to music. In terms of how I got started, I have an undergraduate degree in finance with a minor in computer science. I spent the first 5 or 6 years of my career writing software, which turns out, I studied finance with a minor in computer science, but ended up writing software because, honestly, it paid more. It was flex hours, and I got to come to work in shorts if I wanted to. No, so that worked for a while, and then I decided I wanted a little more control over my over the company, over the destination. So I went back to school, got an MBA, and just sort of a PhD in finance and quantitative economics. And went to work as a product line manager, working in product marketing, and then into strategic alliances, business development, executive leadership. Along the way, in between opportunities, I started teaching at the university level, and I do have a PhD in management innovation, and the PhD is in management, but my focal area for my research is innovation and disruption. You can still find that on, Google Scholar. You can find a lot of, some of my papers, other scholarly work.
So talk about the disruption piece, because there are so many people that nowadays are talking about being disruptors. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that for a sec.
Yeah, that's a giant topic. And we can certainly talk about it, but what aspect are you interested in?
Did I freeze or did he freeze?
Oh, I got a spinning wheel. It looks like
Hang on 1 second because you're freezing.
You're back, but there was a spinning icon for a minute.
Yeah, Kof. See, Isaac, this is what happens. And Coke disappeared. Where did he go?
Is this Comcast?
Yeah, it's Xfinity.
Xfinity, got it. Yeah,
and now you have there's a lag. I don't know if it's on my end.
Well, there's a branding nightmare for you, Comcast Xfinity.
So I did. Yeah, go ahead. Seriously? Okay, that's weird that we saw it and he didn't. Okay. Okay. The whole thing? No, let's just start this section that we were on. Can I go 3, 2, 1 and just edit it? Yeah, because otherwise we're going to lose. We were in a flow. This way you could teach Isaac what a pain in the ass I am.
Prima
There you
donna.
go. We'll start at the disruptor thing. Awesome. Love you. All right, 3, 2, 1. So, you were talking about disruption, and what I find really interesting is that today everybody's talking about being a disruptor. So why don't we talk about that for a minute?
Sure. Yeah. Once again, I mean, it's just a huge topic, and there's a lot of different stuff to talk about. We could just start with the basic concept. The basic concept is, there was an economist in the 40s, Joseph Schumpeter, who wrote about creative destruction, this idea that we have these waves of innovation, and each wave of innovation kind of disrupts or even destroys previous waves. And so we have an economy where we continue to innovate and evolve, but at the same time we're making old innovations or offerings obsolete. And so and probably in this conversation we won't probably talk a lot about the S-curve of innovation and how that all works. There are actual diagrams that we could talk about that walk through that process.
Wow.
But you can think about an existing industry where you have incumbents or dominant players. And in those cases, the dominant player has a vested interest in making sure they remain dominant and the industry remains relevant. And new entrants often have an opportunity to introduce something new and different that disrupts that flow. And in those cases, that often benefits the new provider, because the incumbent has so much invested in the old products or services that they're not really interested in innovating at that level or disrupting the industry. The most dominant writer around this topic in recent memory was Clayton Christensen. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he's a professor at Harvard University and wrote extensively about this topic. In particular, there's something called the innovator's dilemma, where we talk about how new industries are created. But we can think about things like, for example, and Christensen would argue this one. And it's fair. I actually have I completed a program in data analytics from Harvard University, so I'm allowed to, I think, talk about faculty from that.
Okay.
But think about the case of Uber, right? We have this taxi industry that's steeped in tradition. We've got incumbent providers. We've got cities that are selling medallions and restricting access, so it's really not a very competitive environment. And along comes Travis Kalanick and his crew, and they decide that they want to build honestly, it started as a hobby. They wanted to rent limousines to go clubbing on Saturday night. And they invented this little app to do that, and it required a password. And the only way to get a password was to be their friend. And so there was a small group of people who had access to this limousine service, and that was a big hit. So they thought, well, why don't we do this on a broader basis? And in fact, why don't we use it as a platform application to connect people who have rides to people who need rides.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a car in your driveway that's not doing anything, then maybe you can put it to work and you can help cover the expenses for that. And that application took off. And as you know, I mean, it's completely disrupted the taxi industry and more broadly, the transportation industry. And the cities are still fighting back. The cab companies are still fighting back. They're trying to, reestablish some order to what was a very organized market for them for many years. But for consumers, it's just a lot better solution. And, but the cab companies never saw it coming.
No, I remember, you say that, and it's so funny because taxis were very, with Uber, there's a price. Mm-hmm. It's like you get on there and it's, you're going 5 miles and it's, there's like 4 different options. How big is your party? Whatever, it's going to cost this much. It's going to cost this much. And that's what you pay. Mm-hmm. And what was happening and we'll just say New York with the medallions was, you would get in, and I'll never forget this. I used to use this as an example for marketing and not knowing where you're going. So like when you have, a marketing strategy, if you don't have the right strategy, it's like getting in a cab in Manhattan and just saying, go wherever. Right. And what happened to me, and I did this on purpose, was I landed at LaGuardia and a friend of mine was like, oh, the cabbies are all honest. I'm like, no, they're actually not. And I'm going to pay, but I'm going to prove to you. So I get in the cab and I'm from New York, if you can't tell from my accent, right? So I know New York pretty well. And I was going out to, like 72nd and like 2nd or 3rd. And so I said, this is where I'm going. And the guy goes, okay. And he starts the ticker. So now the meter's going. And it's like the price plus it's nighttime. So it's plus $1 or, whatever. And this thing is going. And he, instead of going to the BQE, because it was LaGuardia, and going across, the BQE to getting into, like the Midtown Tunnel, he went over the Triborough Bridge, all the way up into the other Triborough Bridge to like Bruckner Boulevard at night. Now I'm like, oh my God, we're in the South Bronx. Get me the hell out of here, number one. Number two, how are you going? And he goes, oh, we're taking a shortcut. And I was like, stop your shit. I'm from here. You could have gone. And I told him the other way he could have gone. And he kind of like looked at me. And then I got nervous because I'm, a woman alone in a cab at nighttime. And I'm like, oh my God. So I called my friend. So I was on the phone. Anyway, he got me there. And what would have been probably a $15 trip was almost like $65.
Huh.
And I said, I'm not paying that, right? Because I know how we could have gone. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, you have to pay the thing. And I was like, you know what? Here. And I paid it. Mm-hmm. But my point is that Uber, you have one price.
Well, Uber, they actually, there's been some controversy around their pricing during rush hour too. I mean, the pricing actually goes up.
Well, yes, it does go up.
Right. And that's a function of supply and demand too. I mean, in my mind, that's an honest thing. I can tell you one time I used to teach at this university in Bangkok. I lived in Bangkok, Thailand for a while. And there, everything's negotiated. So they have these little 3-wheeled vehicles called tuk-tuks. And if you're going to go anywhere, you got to ride in the tuk-tuk and you have to negotiate the price. So I went to the mall with some friends one time. We go down to talk to the tuk-tuk driver. We negotiate this price to go to the mall of 300 baht, which sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot in US dollars.
Yeah.
Anyway, we go to the mall. We spend all afternoon there with friends, but it's monsoon season and they have these torrential rains. So we come out and it's just, it's just raining down sheets of rain. And so we got the same guys parked out there waiting. He hadn't gotten another ride since he dropped us off. So we go to get in his tuk-tuk. And I said, well, how much for the way back? And 300, right? He said, no. He said, it's 500. I said, 500? He says, yes. And he says, he looks up at the sky. He says, things are different.
Oh,
my friend said, really, I mean, that's not a lot of money. And he wasn't just pay the guy. We're getting wet,
Right.
So I paid him.
Hilarious.
But that's a real, that in a real economic system, that's it, supply and demand. And it takes into account factors like that, environmental factors.
Right.
So this idea that, that the pricing would be the same at a time of day when there's a higher demand for cars would be artificial, right? I mean, it seems when more people need it, it would be more expensive. And the people that are willing to pay the extra would get first access to the rides, and people who are more frugal would get secondary access.
Right. And it's still a set price. So yes, it went up, but it wasn't like somebody driving you around in circles and the meter's going because, so that's what I mean. So it's like, for me, I'm watching this thing and I'm watching the meter go, dude, what are you doing? But when you get in an Uber, you paid. It's already done. Now you leave a tip or, whatever. But that's what I like about Uber. And my dad used to drive a Medallion. So, and so did my grandfather, actually. I think a lot of people in my family did. So, you would think I would be for that. But I really feel that when people know what to expect, I think it makes it easier. And their reputation is kind of shot because of things that happen, similar that happened to me where they're not exactly straightforward. Now, they used to be back in the day, they just wanted to get you where you were going and get you out so they can get somebody else in.
All right, they want the turns.
Right? Yeah, because, as soon as you get out, there's somebody waiting to get in. And then when they drop that person off, there's somebody waiting to get in. I mean, that's how it was. And now there's like taxi lines at the airport and there's Uber lines and Lyft lines and everything it's all different.
Right. Well, from that, it's a service industry and just like a restaurant, you want to turn the tables. You only have so much capacity. And the more times you can turn the tables, the more capacity you have.
Right.
Assuming you have people to fill those tables.
Yes. And it's funny, my friend, I have two friends that own restaurants in town, and my one friend will be like, get the campers out. And if I bring, if we come in for dinner and stuff, she's like, don't be a camper. Like, they call them campers because, they sit there and they don't spend, they order their meal and then they drink water for like 2 hours so they could sit there and, bullshit. And it's like, get out of here because, that table, there could be other people sitting there.
All right. Well, it depends on the business model too. I mean, for example, like you think about Starbucks, people bring their laptop and they work there, and that's part of why they pay $5 for a cup of coffee. So
right.
I mean, there's a different mix for Starbucks. There's a drive-through window too. Those people pay $5 too, but they don't spend any time there. And somehow we've got to come up with a model that allows us to pay for the overhead and still keep everybody happy from a price perspective.
Yeah. I didn't think
it's interesting. Harvard has this case, an interesting case on, I think it's called the Paramount Diner. And that's in Boston. I don't know if you're familiar with Boston, but it's a breakfast place, a very popular breakfast spot. And people line up, line up down the block to go in there in the morning. But they've got everything timed from when they prepare the meal to when you eat to when they turn the table. And people come in and they say, oh, there's no place to sit. I'm not going to stay there. And they say, look, by the time you get your meal, there will be a place to sit. And if there isn't, we'll pay for it. That's how sure we are of this model.
Wow.
And he almost never buys meals for anybody. So this, I think that case is online. You can find it, but it's a really interesting operations management case because at the end of the day, I mean, the restaurant business is a manufacturing enterprise. Mm-hmm. We take raw materials, we transform them into a product that people are willing to pay for, and they pay for the whole restaurant experience too. So the augmented product is more than just food. It includes that ambiance and the time in line and the rest of that. But I thought it was really interesting that somebody had it, figured out to that level. Now, of course, the pandemic was an extra challenge to them, as it was for many restaurants.
Oh, yeah, and
I think they managed to get through that.
That was hard to watch.
Yeah, well, I mean, people have to, at that point, you have to kind of decide too whether you're going to stick with that model or you're going to do something more related to takeout. So
we have a restaurant in town, and they pivoted. So they were going to open a market before COVID hit, and COVID hit, and they were like, "Well, shit, nobody's coming through the door, so let's make it a takeout, but not just for the restaurant. Let's do all the lettuce and tomatoes and, all the vegetables and all the other stuff." And then what they would also do was with every order, you got a roll of toilet paper and a little hand sanitizer.
How funny.
So they really innovated. And they not only survived, they thrived. And then they opened the market at the end, and then from the market, they would get there. Each business would feed each other. So it was, they were, and they are just, brilliant business people, I think, the way that they did it.
Yeah, they leaned into it. So that's a good thing. I mean, we have to figure out how to be successful in the face of adversity. With innovation, yes. we really we talk about three terms, not to get too academic, but this whole idea of invention versus innovation versus imitation. And they're not necessarily good or bad. They're just different. I mean, so an invention is a new idea or creation that's never existed before. Mm-hmm. An innovation requires that you take that invention and commercialize it in some form. And imitation means just taking somebody's idea and either replicating it, making it better at replicating it. And there's variations off that theme. And it sounds like your friends, combination of things, maybe, what they were doing before, added some new ideas to it, repackaged it into a new offering, and were able to lean into it and thrive. And
they opened for dining service. I think it was like 1 or 2 days a week. And it was like almost the cleanest plate. Like you walked in, everybody had masks on. All of the menus had like plastic over that. Like they were cleaning everything constantly, paper. Like it was so interesting. It was weird. I just remember walking in there and it was, I still look at COVID as like this dystopian novel, right? Because everybody's walking around in masks and all the thing, and you're doing the thing. And I remember walking into the restaurant. It was my wife and I. It was our anniversary, and they had flowers at the table because I, ordered flowers and stuff, and but everything was just like covered, and you could just see them constantly cleaning, and it made me feel good knowing that. Of course they were taking care of things, but at the same time, it was freaky. And I looked at Heather and I was like, man, maybe we shouldn't like eat out for I could just cook. I'll just order the food. Another one of my clients, is a specialty market. So I would order all of my steaks and all that stuff, from him, and get that delivered. And I'm like, we don't ever have to leave the house. I'm a professional, I was a professional cook, so I can cook anything. So I always kept it interesting. And then we can order, takeout, once in a while. But I just remember walking into the restaurant feeling really weird, as good of a job as they were doing, because they were fantastic. But it just felt weird. I was like, yeah, I'll cook at home. And that's what I did until things started loosening up, because I had my own shtick with COVID. I ended up going back to like therapy because it completely messed me up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people had to do it. A lot of businesses didn't survive. But I mean, from a strategic planning standpoint, you also it brings up an important question. You have to find a way not only to survive environmental threats or environmental changes, but you have to find a way to thrive. And you have to know if this is temporary, or if it's temporary, how long, or if this is the new normal, if this is just the way it's gonna be from now on, and that is incredibly tricky, and especially when we're allocating resources and pivoting and changing up our whole business model, because if it went back tomorrow, then that might be even worse, So, but I can tell you, you remind me of a funny story. I remember during COVID, I'm in at a Walmart in rural Eastern Oregon, and guy walks in, and it's open carry in this particular area. God. This guy walks in, he's wearing a gun on his belt, and he's got this mask on. And I grew up in San Francisco. I'm thinking, in my neighborhood, that would be really bad. Somebody'd call the police.
Oh, but my God.
That was kind of normal there, like nobody even seemed to blink an eye.
You walk into a bank like that. Oh my God. It's so funny because, I live in Indiana and it's open carry. And I didn't say anything with the mask thing because I think I would have, I didn't leave the house to go to the supermarket, so I wouldn't have seen it because I had everything delivered and left outside and sprayed. I mean, I was so psycho about it. And I shouldn't use the word psycho, but I was so triggered by it. It just I'm type A, and I need to know I can control my environment, and I couldn't control what other people were doing. And it took me about a year into therapy to realize that I was freaking out because I couldn't control, what other people were doing. And my therapist was like, because this was like a therapist that I had gone to like 20, 30 years before. And the fact that she was still around was like amazing. And when we got to because a good therapist will make you arrive to the conclusion. They're not going to tell you, because I'd be like, well, how do I fix it? Well, that's not what you're here for. You're here for me to help you figure out how to fix it. I'm not going to tell you how. So she was amazing.
If you pay more, can you just get the answer?
Pardon me?
If you pay more, can you just get the answer?
Yeah, exactly right. You would think it would be easy, but they don't. Well, and she was so funny because when I finally realized that they were about like 8 months in, and I was like, oh, I can't control what they're doing. And she went, you think? It's like it took you 8 months to figure this out. And I was like, what is wrong with me? But it was just this really, I couldn't control anybody. And like, I would like, go to Walgreens because we would need something that somebody didn't have. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to Walgreens, to pick up my medication because they didn't have delivery at that point. So I had to go in to pick it up, and I had a mask on, and there were these two women, mother and daughter, that didn't have their mask on. And I didn't even make eye contact. I looked and I just went this way, and they start following me. And I have my AirPod in. So I call my wife and I'm like, hi. She's like, what's going on? I'm like, there's two people that had a mask and they're following me. And I think they want to start crap. She goes, don't engage. She goes, do not engage. I don't want to pay bail. I was like, okay. So I got off the phone. And I'm walking to the back to the pharmacy, and the daughter looks and goes, why do you have to be a P word? Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm not having this conversation. And I kept going. Mm-hmm. And the mother's like, it's people like you that are making this unsafe. And I was like, nope, sorry. So I'm walking in the back of the store to get my medication. That's all I want, is just to get my medication. And they're like just yelling at me. And I finally turned around and I said, asshole, I'm the one with the mask. You're the one that's not safe. Uh-huh. And the guy at the pharmacy was like, oh my God. So I just went in, gave my name, and I have like auto pay. So I was like, could you just please throw this on auto pay? And I grabbed it and I walk out and I get in my car, and they're like following into my car. And I'm like, what is wrong with you people? It was like, people were looking. So I get in the car and I call Angie, my therapist, and I was like, okay, you want to talk about me not being able to control people? I told her what happened, and she said, "Please tell me you didn't engage." I said, "No, I like for a minute did, but it didn't get as bad as it could have." So, and I got home and I didn't leave again. I didn't leave. Like, Heather, because she was she works in steel, so she was an essential worker. She had to go out, so I was like, "You just go and get all the stuff. I do not have to leave the house." And then I ended up getting COVID. And now I have this lifelong condition because of it. But, it was just one of those things that it was like, damn, I know how Howard Hughes felt. You just didn't want to leave the house. You didn't want to, like do anything. And it was.
Well, yeah, but Howard Hughes didn't, he didn't live in a bad house either.
No, he had a nice house, but he didn't leave the room, right? You saw the room that he stayed in. I mean, it was like, my house is actually pretty nice. I have a nice house. So I have a really nice backyard.
Howard Hughes place. He had a swimming pool and all kinds of beautiful people wandering around. It's like, I'm not sure. Most of them weren't wearing masks.
No, I'm sure. I don't know if they were wearing clothes, never mind masks, but that's a different podcast. Yeah, it's just, I think the way people innovate and the way that they pivot, to me, it was fascinating. Just watching the whole thing, and it made me, so my business pivoted because I was always in person. Mm-hmm. And it helped me go national because now I'm talking to people on LinkedIn. I'm getting people as clients in Colorado and in New York and up in, Chicago, and like all these, because I'm online and I don't have to leave the house to have meetings. So it kind of changed the way people did business.
Yeah, no, I would say there are a couple of things that happened for me personally. I mean, we could talk about education. That was kind of surreal.
Oh my God, teaching online. I can't even imagine what that was like.
Well, there's teaching online, but I also did teaching in person and, in a classroom with shields and masks and, it's hard to imagine how much communication actually comes from facial expressions and tonation. And you don't have any, especially when you have international students, and you don't have any of that. So the classroom environment is really difficult that way. But I think the upside comes from a travel perspective. We were forced to get together, toe to toe to talk about just about anything. And, if we're talking about, travel across the U.S., 3 hours one way, 3 hours the other, hotel rooms, travel time and cabs and whatnot. I mean, there's a ton of time involved and expense associated with that. So I found that, from a meeting standpoint, I could get way more productive, especially when people just accepted it. There was, it's not, you're trying to avoid me. It's just, this is the way we're doing things, Zoom,
Yeah.
And so I got a lot more productive from that standpoint. But the piece that you miss out on, I think, is this whole social interaction. You go to a trade show, and a lot of the most beneficial things I got from trade shows were not from the presentations or for the exhibits. They were from a little conversation I had over lunch or by the water cooler or, with somebody I never even knew existed,
Right.
And so that kind of happenstance connection or conversation is really harder to come by.
And the human connection, right, I think is so pivotal to business relationships. I mean, I have great relationships with my national clients, and now I have an international client. But locally, I'm meeting in person now, and we're doing all the things, and it's back to how it used to be. So now on my calendar, it's so funny because when I schedule something, I have to schedule it as in person and block out the travel time that it takes to get from here to where I'm going to actually have the meeting, and then have the meeting, and then to get back home or wherever I'm going. Because if I don't, people are so used to seeing time on your calendar, they don't think in person. They're just like, cha-ching. So I started, getting these like I would have a 2 to 3, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock meeting. And then at 3:30, somebody booked right after. And it was like, oh crap. Or it would be 3 o'clock. And I'm like, there's no way I have to. And so now building that travel time back into your calendar and your schedule was for me, like a big game changer because I had to like redo stuff.
Right. No, that's definitely true. But the other factor is that, there's communication is so much better. You have so many more tools. And so, people, it used to be, I remember that it was like taboo to call people on their cell phone because they had to pay for minutes and, and not everybody had one. And, but now
it was after 9 at night, and then it was like 3 minutes after 9, I think, right?
Yeah, and then but now these days it's routine, right? People call me on my cell phone. I call customers on their private, on their cell phone, and we connect. It may be after business hours. It might be in an airport. It might be en route somewhere. And in fact, if I go back far enough, I remember at this computer company I helped build, I had to carry a pager. And the pager would go off and there'd be a phone number. It wasn't even a message. It was a phone number. And then I had to find a pay phone and put money into it so I could call into the office and say, what's up,
Remember when, so they had the pagers, and then I think it was Motorola came out with because I was working for a comms company, and we got our first little Motorola flip phone. And it was a pager as well as a telephone. And it was the coolest thing ever because it had like a little blue screen and the analog number came up and it was like, but it was still a pager. Like if it would just go, I think if it was a ring, it was a ring. But if it was like certain beeps, it was they were paging you. So
I think the middle step was I actually got a pager that had you could put a little message in. And I think that was like 160 characters. And I think that's why Twitter originally had the limitation of 160 characters, because that's what would fit in a pager. And I remember you could get a message and you could respond. And then there was the BlackBerry, right? That was for that was the next step.
The BlackBerry was after,
because BlackBerry you could actually, when somebody gets in your message, you could actually start texting them. Yes,
but the BlackBerry you could send email, and that was the whole big thing with the BlackBerry was you could actually. Yeah. Right? You could like send an email. And I remember they had like the BlackBerry Trio. Uh-huh. I will never forget this because it spoke. So when a message would come through, this is like the funniest story. When a message would come through, it was like a reminder, right? It would be like, don't forget to call Brad or don't forget to whatever. And I had... She was my partner at the time, but my now wife. I had her when she was PMSing. Uh-huh. I had it in my phone so that I knew. Well, I used to PMS too, and we were this was like the funniest thing. We were in Sam's Club, and we were with our friend Tawny, who was visiting us. We're walking through Sam's, and all of a sudden you hear, because I had everything loud because I needed to be able to hear if my phone rang. It was like, Heather, PMS starting 1 hour. And and Tawny was like dying, and Heather just went like this. For those of you who are listening and not watching, the glare from hell. And I couldn't stop laughing. I was like, well, you idiot. So I took voice notifications off after that because,
exactly.
It wasn't safe. But
I remember that we used to have these old meetings and, they called them the crackberry, right? Because people get addicted to texting. And you'd be in a meeting with these venture capitalists and, the 3 or 4 venture capitalists at the board meeting, they would all have their BlackBerries out, and then they'd write a message and they'd look at each other and then they'd laugh and then they'd look at each other all during a meeting. And you're like, this is not fair.
Oh my God. It's just so funny. Yeah. Cause I remember when I was working for a company up in Chicago. Well, both of those with the Motorola, I was working for a comms company, but the other company I was working for, when I got my first BlackBerry, and I felt so freaking important. I was like, okay, I have this thing now. I can send emails. But then the bad thing that nobody thought about until after, we realized it was Now people can get hold of you anytime. There was no, leave a message and I'll call you back tomorrow or whatever. Email was there and texting was there and all of the stuff was there and all of the ease was gone. It was just like, or the ease was there. It was like, there's no way that we can't get hold of you now. And it was like, son of a bitch. Like, was that a good thing or was it a bad thing?
Right. You're in a hotel room in Paris, middle of the night, and you get a call from somebody at work. It's like, it's dark here, right?
Right. we were in Hawaii and Kofi. It was so funny. I was working, I was in a traffic jam and, Hawaii is 6 hours behind us. Well, I'm on Eastern time. So
Sure.
It was like 6 hours behind us. So if it was noon, it was 6 o'clock at night. And there was something going on with one of our clients. So I call him and he's like, why are you calling me from Hawaii? And I was like, well, I'm kind of sitting in a traffic jam. And I showed the traffic jam, but then there's the ocean right there. I don't care. Like so I said, I have some time to kill. He was like, you have 1 minute and then I'm hanging up. So I, talked to him for the 1 minute that we hung up, but he was like, you're on vacation. I was like, but it was fun to be able to, make that call. I was like, okay. But yeah, things just, they're changing so quickly and AI now is just, oh my God, it's just changing the landscape on so many different things at this point. It's just like, the way people are using it, the way I personally use it as a tool, not a replacement. And I'm actually going to be talking to people about this in the next, few weeks, because I don't think it was, maybe they meant for it to be a replacement, but for marketing, for messaging, for any of that, I write what I'm writing. I drop it into, my AI to clean up the grammar. And it cleans up the grammar. And I'm like, great, because sometimes I suck at it. If I'm writing too fast, I'll miss a comma, I'll misspell something and it fixes it. But I know people that use it to do the work.
Right. I always have this topic. It's interesting. A lot of interesting things are happening in that field. It's certainly when I was at Harvard, was at the front end of this, where we were looking at large language models and, what that meant and the implications. And it's interesting. But I can also say as a computer scientist, I've been hearing about AI for, 30 plus years. And it takes all different forms. And, people talk about like HAL from, 2001: A Space Odyssey, or iRobot, Will Smith was in that. And that's, artificial life forms, kind of, artificial intelligence, symbiont life, but what we're seeing now is not so much that, as it's different ways of processing information and using information better and faster ways. So, which is all good. I mean, I'm not sure whether it's real artificial intelligence or not, but I am sure that a lot of it helps us be more productive and can be effective.
100%.
Even the engineers that work for me today, who are educated in computer science, who know how to write code from scratch, they're not. They come up with very detailed questions or queries. They run it through a tool like ChatGPT. It writes some code, and then they fix it, right? Because it never works the way it comes back, but they just fix it, and it saves hours and hours, and that's a good thing.
Which is, I agree with that, but we don't have a hell of a lot of time left, and I did want to talk about. We're not going to get to my question, but you have this new little venture going called Speedy Desktop Comp. So I know you're doing direct mail, and then you have Speedy. So talk a little about those, because I really want to get that in.
Oh no, I appreciate that. So our primary business is something called Sendix. It's a software company. We do a class of software called Web to Print, which we automate the production of print products. Then we have Our primary brand is something called Zehr Mail. It's like airmail with a Z on the front. So Zehr Mail automates direct mail campaigns, and we do a lot of it. We do millions of pieces of mail on a monthly basis. The basic idea is you upload a document, you upload a list, you see a preview of what's going to be produced, you like it, you're in the mail tomorrow, the next day at a fraction of the price. So we do a lot of that for our clients. And in another session we could talk about why mail is still relevant, why that's a good thing, why people are still using it.
I think it's 100% good. I actually want to talk to you about that because I may use that for some of my clients. So we'll talk about that offline.
Yeah, the ROI on direct mail is very compelling, and especially in this digital age. There's digital fatigue, and it's something different, and it has wider reach and a different kind of response. It's kind of built into the American psyche. So we could talk about
it's more personal, right? It's like when you get something in the mail and it's, depending on, like there are things that I get and I just throw it out, but there are other things that if there's a new business in town or something and it's like a new business and I'll be like, oh, okay. I'm more interested in that than I am getting an email from the new business going, hey, we're new in town. It's like, I don't know. It probably goes right to spam, to be honest.
It's tactile. You can reach every household business in America, and people are it's, as I say, it's built in an American psyche. So people are used to receiving in the mail. It's not like getting a telemarketer's call, and because it has a cost to it, unlike digital, people tend to be more conscious about where they send or who they send it to or what that offer looks like. Because if you send a piece of mail to somebody who's not the right target customer, it has a cost, right? It's expensive, so people don't like to do that. So the Direct Marketing Association says that on average, direct mail returns $12 for every dollar invested, and very few major advertising mediums can match that number. But the newest product we've been doing that for a very long time. We created the product category is called hybrid mail. We created that working with the U.S. Postal Service a lot of years ago. But the newest product we have is something called Speedy. It's www.zehrmail.com/Speedy. And it's basically a desktop icon. And what you can do is you can drop a letter on it, whether it's a Word doc or a PDF. And it gives you a pop-up. It says, where would you like to send it? You type in an address or pick an address from the address book, push the button, and it goes. It turns into a letter and arrives in somebody's mailbox as, physical mail. And we actually give you an email confirmation when it's been delivered. The price is just slightly more than the cost of a postage stamp. And the first two letters are free. So anybody in America could give it a try. We really designed it to replace the postal meter, and describing what a postal meter is would take it entirely another discussion.
Yeah.
But that's the commercial opportunity. Any person in America, any customer in America, could use Speedy to send, could and should use Speedy to send a letter. And since the first two letters are free, there's no excuse not to do that.
So when you're sending out that doc, is there a way to put I guess if you're dropping the doc, you can put your signature in. Because I'm just trying to figure out how to personalize it, because it's going to be typed out, right? Because it's a doc, so it's not handwritten or something like that.
Well, you can, if you're doing something in Word or PDF, then of course you can use a handwritten font. You can also include a signature that's, a GIF or an image of a signature.
Yeah, I do that on them.
Or you could just create the letter and write your signature and scan it. I mean, there's lots of ways to get there if you wanted to. But the idea is to be as fast and easy as email, but have all the benefits of physical mail. And those are significant. We could talk about what those are, but that's available to everybody. And honestly, if you're doing mail, if you want to send somebody mail in the U.S. and you're international, you're in Europe or Asia or somewhere, this tool, not only do you shave, 2 weeks off a delivery, but you're only going to pay the cost of U.S. postage. So it's a huge benefit from that perspective. The biggest challenge I think we have is really just awareness. With a product like that everybody could use. I mean, how are you going to make everybody aware that it's available? And
Right.
it's time consuming and expensive.
So if I have a client in France and I want to send this letter to her, how would that work? It would just like go through US airmail and like the same thing, or
If you into a single letter?
oh, so you're talking bulk mail?
No, I'm just first class mail. So if you just type a letter and save it, the Word file, or save it as a PDF, you just take your doc and you drop it on the desktop icon, and it wakes up and it says, "Where do you want to send it?" And you give it an address. What happens on the back end, I mean, at the risk of providing too much technical detail, is we get those letters in digital format. We combine them with a bunch of other letters because we do commercial print in large scale, and
Okay.
and our partners don't want to run one letter. I mean, they want to run 500,000 letters. So we aggregate them all together and lay down barcodes and all of the stuff required to do automated production. We run them through the commercial production facility. We, fold them, insert them, address them, put postage on them, deliver them to the U.S. Postal Service, make sure we're getting pre-sort discounts, which of course are reflected in your lower price point. And we move them electronically as far as we can before we turn them into print. So that helps. It's better for the environment, helps speed delivery. And then we mail it. And because we track every letter through the U.S. Postal Service, we know when it's processed. We know when it's being carried to its destination. We know when it's been delivered. And we'll send you an email confirmation when it's delivered. So end to end, it's just a better solution. It's faster, easier, less expensive.
That sounds very innovative. I like the way that. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of like how I would use that. How do you come up with this stuff?
That's a great question. I think forever. I mean, it depends. There's a lot of great ideas. I mean, and certainly we don't have a quota or a corner on that market. Yeah. But it's different ideas and way you put them together and different problems. I mean, as an entrepreneur, it's always best. You mentioned talking about entrepreneurs. I mean, as an entrepreneur, it's always best to focus on the problem rather than the technology. So often you see people say, I've got a hammer and I want to use it. So every problem they run into looks like a nail. But I started my career as a mechanic. And so I know that the most important part is to diagnose the problem and figure out what I need to do to fix it, and then picking the right tool to solve that problem. So direct mail is not the right tool for every marketing challenge, but it is very good for some of them. And, if we can identify the right market opportunities and design solutions for real problems, real compelling problems that people have, the outcome tends to be good. We also know that the best technology does not always win. I mean, there's lots of examples of that, where somebody had, beta versus VHS. I mean, it's an obvious one, So there are lots of examples where somebody had the best technology, but they didn't actually win in the marketplace because they were focused on the technology instead of the problem. So as entrepreneurs, we can identify that, then we're in better shape. Now, for me personally, over the course of my career, early in my career, well, the internet's been around forever. I mean, in one form or another, the internet's been around since the 50s. Regular consumers, as an engineer, I had access to it, early in my career. Consumers really got access to it in the 90s when Netscape, and if we got the first commercial browsers.
God, Netscape. I remember Netscape.
But it occurred to me when I started doing entrepreneurial stuff, starting new ventures, that there was probably a huge opportunity in something called convergence, right? We have all of these legacy systems the public telephone network with fax machines, the mail system. I mean, all of these legacy systems that we count on and that are sometimes mission critical. And we've got this new medium called the internet that everybody's now connected to. And what can we do to bridge those two worlds? And so I've worked on a lot of different solutions to those problems. One of the early companies we did was called Effusion, and Effusion designed gateways and applications to connect the internet with the public telephone network. So we sold mostly to ISPs, internet service providers, and telephone companies. Our customers were like US West and GTE and Bell Canada and people like that. And allowed people to use their telephone while they were surfing the internet. But a classic example of convergence, and some of that technology still exists in offerings like Skype, which are now pretty mainstream. But if we can find real problems, and back to the Uber example, there's those guys, they start out just fooling around, but they stumbled across a real problem that was compelling for people.
See, I think you hit the nail on the head right there with, not looking at the technology and looking at the problem. Because I think, we could look at, I don't know, records, and then there were like, 8 tracks, and then, cassette tapes, and then CDs, and, all the other stuff. Like everything just started getting, to me, that was the technology piece. I mean, maybe they had a problem of how to, I don't know, make things smaller and more portable. But, at the end of the day, I think all of the things that you're doing is just, it solves a lot of problems. But I think there's also, with the mail thing, I mean, I don't think there's necessarily a problem there, but I think it's a really cool service that people can use to touch their clients or whoever they're trying to touch in a different way. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the problem for us is that direct mails, first of all, if you're not doing it, it's hard to know how to even get started.
Sure.
But if you are doing it or you want to do it, it can be a hassle, and the U.S. Postal Service, is well-meaning, but they have a lot of rules, and they're a big organization, and they're pretty inflexible most of the time. So for good reason. I mean, they deliver 40% of the world's mail, and so the operation just has to work. And in order for the operation to work, there needs to be rules, and there needs to be quality control, and all the things you would expect in an operations-oriented environment. But we make that easier for our customers. And somebody comes to us, they've got 50,000 pieces that need to be in the mail tomorrow, and we'll do that. And we make it fast and easy. And we do it, at a lower price point than most of our competitors.
That's pretty awesome.
So that's how we found that niche. But there's lots of other things like that. And each wave of disruption, each wave of new innovation also creates new problems to be solved. Right? I mean,
yes.
We talk about Zoom, and Zoom filled a problem. Zoom was already solving a problem, with conferencing application, but that was just amplified by COVID.
Yeah, like nobody expected. Zoom didn't expect what happened. Like literally overnight, it was like everybody was on Zoom calls, and it was like Skype. What's Skype? Like Skype completely just went like down the tubes, and all of a sudden there was Zoom, and then they couldn't keep up with the security. I remember,
meeting bombs
breaking into. But like people getting, because there weren't access codes so that anyone could just walk into any meeting. And I remember a guy walked into one of our meetings and didn't have clothes on, and it was like, oh my God, we have to close the meeting and start over again because nobody even knew this guy. It was like, where the hell did this guy come from?
It's one of those kind of meetings.
So it was very jarring because there's a bunch of us like marketing experts, and we're talking, and all of a sudden like this new thing comes up and this guy walks in and we're like, close the meeting down. And just so much weird stuff was going on. And then I remember Skype would be like, here's a new security, thing. Here's a new security patch. Here's a new security patch. They kept coming out with all these security patches because they had to, because people were just like, breaking into meetings. And now I think it's pretty secure. But
no,
so,
exactly. But I think that experience, and we were talking about not going to trade shows and different ways of doing business, that all created the need for different kinds of things,
facilitating meetings online.
Yeah. Set of other problems that need to be solved. So
yeah,
and that's what makes it work.
yeah. So we are over an hour. I knew this was going to go fast. I definitely want to invite you back because I think we can just have a whole series of all the stuff that you could talk about. So, but I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to, speak with myself and my audience. And where can people find you? How do people find you?
Oh, well, if they're interested in Zehrmail, as I hope they are, they can find us at www.zehrmail.com. That's like airmail with a Z on the front. You can download a copy of Speedy there at zehrmail.com/Speedy. If you want to connect with me personally, then I'm on LinkedIn, linkedin.in.Wilson Zehr. All my contact information is there. My email address is wilson@sendix.com. Sendix is our software company. Zehrmail.com works too, wilson@zehrmail.com. Unlike a lot of online companies, we publish our 800 number in big font right on the site. We want to talk to our customers. If you've got ideas, you have questions, you need help, we want to talk to you. We want to engage. We want to provide advice. So I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime. You can talk to us about our product or any others. I'm happy to spend time.
Okay. So the last question that I ask all my guests is what lights your fire?
What lights my fire? Personally or professionally?
Whichever. You can get personal, whatever,
I don't know. There's so much. I mean, I've got just 1,000 different interests. I mean, family's number one. And am into, outdoor activities, fitness. I've been a competitive swimmer for my entire life. And so I love to get out and exercise. And I'm fortunate enough to live in Oregon and we have a place in the Columbia River Gorge, which is a national scenic area. So beautiful place to spend time. And then, I just love business and innovation. I've spent a lot of time studying it, reading about it, doing it. I've done probably a dozen startups, either primary or assisting others. I've raised an awful lot of venture capital, returned a lot more to investors, and still looking for new challenges. And so some combination of all of those things. I could tell you just one, but that might be, I don't know. I don't think that'd be enough.
No, that's thank you. That's I know it's hard to kind of like dial that down to one, but again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I'm going to say goodbye again. Everyone, thank you for hanging out. Going to try and get Wilson back on. There's a weird noise coming out on there, but and we'll talk about more of the things. Appreciate you hanging out in Hour Plus, and I really appreciate all of you out there that allow me to get to do this because this truly is my passion project. And I'm just very grateful. So until next time, go out and find what lights your fire. See ya.